波静かにたゆとう太平洋に火炎と鉄の嵐が吹き荒れた時、日本海軍の栄光と悲惨を共に背負って。
When it comes to World War II, we can't ignore the power of war equipment such as fighter planes, warships, and tanks. This time, we'll discuss one of Japan's best masterpieces, the A6M Zero fighter. This aircraft was designed based on the needs of the Japanese Navy in 1937. The Navy requested a long-range and maneuverable fighter plane. This legendary Japanese fighter left an indelible mark in the history of aerial combat, especially in the Pacific battles. In Japanese, Zero is called Rei Shiki Kanjo Sentoki or Risen, while the Allied soldiers referred to it as Zeke. To understand the greatness of the A6M Zero, we need to go back to the early days before World War II. In October 1937, the Japanese Navy requested the development of a new advanced aircraft from Japanese manufacturing companies, Nakajima and Mitsubishi. On January 17, 1938, the requirements were revealed to representatives from both companies in Yokosuka, Japan. They wanted an aircraft that could reach a speed of 500 km per hour at an altitude of 4,000 meters, climb to 3,000 meters in 3.5 minutes, and operate from aircraft carriers. Nakajima's team withdrew from the project due to the challenging demands of the Navy. However, Mitsubishi, which eventually worked on this super aircraft project, initially considered rejecting it as the company was already occupied with a seaplane bomber project. But a designer named Jiro Horikoshi confidently believed that his team could undertake this project. After negotiating with the Navy, the seaplane bomber project was cancelled and replaced with the development of the Zero fighter. Although the Japanese Navy's demands were considered very challenging, Horikoshi combined many advanced techniques of that era. The Zero aircraft was designed with thin elliptical wings to reduce air resistance, thereby increasing the speed and performance of the aircraft. Additionally, the aircraft frame was made of aluminum, and to meet the Japanese Navy's expectations, Hiroshi created holes in the frame to reduce the weight of the aircraft. The cockpit of the Zero fighter was also slightly smaller, as it was designed to accommodate the shorter stature of Japanese soldiers compared to the Allied forces. Despite prioritizing speed, maneuverability, and range, Hiroshi had to make some sacrifices in the design of the Zero aircraft. The skin of the aircraft was extremely thin, with the thickest part measuring only 1.2 mm and the thinnest part being 0.5 mm. Due to the thinness of the Zero's skin, the designers attached foot grips tightly to the surface of the aircraft so that when the pilot entered the cockpit, the aircraft's skin wouldn't be damaged. On March 23, 1939, the prototype of the Zero aircraft was dismantled and moved about 25 miles to the Kagamigahara Naval Base in Japan, where it would make its maiden flight on April 1. Then, on October 25, 1939, the second prototype was delivered, and shortly after that, production began. Many Japanese Navy pilots soon realized that the A6M Zero fighter was the most efficient aircraft they had ever flown. Saburo Sakai later recalled, "The Zero excited me like nothing else I had ever experienced. Even on the ground, it had the cleanest design I had ever seen on an aircraft. It was a dream to fly." Zero had its first mission on August 19, 1940, when 12 A6M Zeros escorted 54 G-3M2 bombers on a bombing mission against the capital of Chongqing. Zero immediately engaged in aerial combat with Chinese pilots, yielding unexpected results. During their mission on September 13, 1940, the pilots of the 12th Air Corps of the Joint Air Force successfully shot down 27 Russian-made I-15 and I-16 fighter planes, surpassing expectations. After a year of fighting in China, a small number of Zero fighters shot down a total of 44 Chinese planes, with only 2 Zero fighters lost, and those were due to anti-aircraft fire rather than aerial combat. Chinese Nationalist Air Force pilots attempted to fight against the Japanese aircraft, but their efforts were in vain because the Japanese planes were not only highly maneuverable in the air but also faster and equipped with heavier weaponry compared to the Chinese planes. The Flying Tigers group based in China also warned about this extraordinary fighter aircraft, but the United States only realized its capabilities after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Japanese officers, seeing the satisfactory results of this aircraft, believed that if Zero was in the hands of skilled pilots, they would be able to take on 2 to 5 enemy aircraft. Zero actually became frightening for the Allies because it was flown by experienced Japanese pilots, especially during the China campaign. In fact, it was estimated that during the attack on Pearl Harbor, the Japanese pilots had an average flight experience of 800 hours. On December 7, 1941, when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, their intention was to intimidate the United States and prevent them from interfering with their hegemony in the Asian region. However, instead of being intimidated, the United States announced on the same day that they would join World War II. Although American technology was superior to Japan's, their 2 main fighter aircraft at the time, the P-40 Warhawk and F-4F Wildcat, were unable to match the prowess of the A6M Zero. In reality, both American planes were superior to the Japanese Zero, and one of the reasons these American pilots suffered many defeats was because they spent flight time on various types of aircraft such as fighters, dive bombers, and torpedo bombers, so they lacked specialization in one type of aircraft. This diverse training was only abolished in September 1941, 3 months before the attack on Pearl Harbor. With the Zero entering the battlefield, the course of the air battles completely changed. Zero made history as a carrier-based aircraft that confidently engaged in aerial combat with any aircraft they encountered, whether from aircraft carriers or airfields. A significant blow occurred on June 4, 1942, when Japan sent one of its young pilots named Tadayoshi Koga to invade the Aleutian Islands. That day marked the beginning of the decline of the Zero, which had long been at the peak of its superiority in World War II-era fighter aircraft. Despite the unclear motivation of Japan to seize this island, unfortunately, Koga's mission did not go smoothly and ended with his death. His Zero aircraft flipped over in a marsh and was not able to be destroyed. It should be noted that if Zero pilots found themselves in unfavorable conditions, such as being captured by the enemy or making a forced landing in enemy territory, they were instructed to destroy or burn the aircraft to prevent vital information from falling into enemy hands. After Koga's death, on July 10, 1942, a routine patrolling pilot of the U.S. Navy in the Aleutians spotted the wreckage of Koga's aircraft, and the U.S. Navy evacuated the plane and sent it to the San Diego base for research. The leaked information about the Zero was a harsh blow to Japan because now the United States knew its weaknesses. From the research, it was discovered that the A6M Zero actually had low durability and was difficult to maneuver at high speeds. Now, armed with the knowledge needed to defeat the Zero in battle, the Allies quickly devised strategies to overcome Japan in the air. American pilots were given rules to maintain high speeds and avoid engaging the Zero at low speeds. Aside from leaked information, another factor that contributed to the downfall of the Zero was its highly inefficient production method. Japan at that time had scarce valuable resources, limited engineers, and an inadequate economy. As a result, in 1943, instead of implementing mass production based on assembly lines, the Zero was still being manually built by skilled workers, consuming significant time and effort. One unique fact about the Zero aircraft is that they were transported using ox-drawn carts because there were no nearby trucks or railways around the Nagoya factory. During the Battle of Midway in June 1942, Japan lost 4 aircraft carriers and 234 planes, with the most significant loss being more than 10% of experienced naval fighter pilots. To replenish the ranks of trained pilots, the Japanese Navy called back many veteran fighter pilots to Japan to train replacements. Meanwhile, Mitsubishi continued to work on the next generation Zero variant by improving the aircraft's engine to the supercharged Sakae 21, which had 1,130 horsepower. However, despite the engine upgrade, the armament remained the same, and this new Zero variant still couldn't overcome the weaknesses of the previous version. On the other hand, the Allies, especially the United States, with more engineers and large corporations, quickly shifted and adjusted their economic contributions to create war machines. Furthermore, towards the end of the Pacific War, the military strength of the Allies, particularly the United States, surpassed that of Japan. The large number of operational Zero fighter planes and their high maneuverability made them ideal for special suicide attacks, known at the time as kamikaze. This idea was actually born out of desperation from Japanese officers witnessing their country being on the brink of destruction. The famous kamikaze stories were rooted in the doctrine of utmost loyalty to the emperor, and many young pilots believed it was better to sacrifice themselves by crashing their planes and causing damage rather than facing American pilots with Hellcats and Corsairs and ending up with no results. Out of the 2,363 Japanese Navy aircraft that participated in special attack missions, 1,189 of them were A6M Zero fighter planes. It is known that from 1939 to 1945, around 10,000 units of the Zero were produced, and some surviving Zero planes were displayed in several museums, including the Aerospace Museum in Yogyakarta, Indonesia, the Yashikin Museum in Tokyo, Japan, and the National Air and Space Museum in the United States. Thank you for watching the video about the Zero aircraft. If you found this video helpful, please don't forget to share it with your friends. See you in the next interesting videos.